Today, we're really going to sort of get a bit more technical with feedback, how to give, how to receive feedback, how to do it.
How to do it, yeah. And I think how to do it starts actually with understanding feedback. And I must say, this book was really an eye-opener for me, because I really discovered the different nuances and facets of feedback. And it's much, 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 much more than we actually think feedback is.
It's true. It's like, yeah, it's like the iceberg. Huh? I mean, it's always, I think, yeah, if you ask people what feedback is to them, I think the majority will really refer to their, as we discussed in the first episode a little bit also, the one moment in the year when they're sitting in front of their boss and they feel judged for what they have to do. And that's what feedback means for a lot of folks. And it's such a pity.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I think last in our first conversation, we said even you can get feedback even from the universe. It's hidden, it's indirect, it's spontaneous, and then what you said, the planned one. But in the book, I think the eye opener for me was really to see that there are different types of feedbacks, and that they serve different purposes. And actually, as a human being, we have the need for, we long for acceptance. And this is an appreciative feedback clearly giving you. But on the other side, we are also driven by learning. And then it's probably more the other two types of feedback.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. I mean, what's it called? Constructive feedback and then evaluative feedback. Yeah. And but today I think we're really going to talk about how to do a little bit all of them. Of course, the formal feedback, I mean, it comes with a whole ritual usually, and it's actually quite codified in many organizations. So we might focus a little bit less on that. But yeah, I think yeah, how to give and receive feedback, and let's keep the meatier one, the receiving feedback, for a bit later. How to give feedback? What for you are some good guidelines to give useful feedback to people?
Starts with purpose. Why do I want to give feedback to someone? What's in there? I mean, there are many opportunities, and often probably missed opportunities, because it would actually be nice to tell someone how nice this was and the little things you could improve. And that would be then really a mix between appreciation, but also learning and growing. And I think it's often in the mix, actually. And yeah, we just have to get into the habit to do it on a very regular basis.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, if I look at the practice, I mean, what's been my experience of people giving me or giving other people feedback, and some, at least a very simple thing that is also a beginning of good practice. It's always helpful, because people have such expectations and negative expectations because of this relation with a formal evaluative feedback, that they sort of brace themselves for that. So starting with encouraging words, with what you see is working well, is usually a good thing. And then you can actually move on to some of the constructive feedback. But there's also some more. I mean, literature is quite extensive on the topic of giving feedback, and there's a number of attributes to good feedback giving. I mean, it's almost like, you know, in monitoring evaluation, the SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. I think there's some element of that, and I think the first one, specific, is really there. I mean, I think good feedback giving is not like, oh, you did a great job. Like, great job about what? You don't really know what people are talking about. Or, oh, that was really a stupid paper that you wrote. Oh, okay, so can you be more specific? That would be really helpful. I think it's yeah. There's an element of being, for instance, respectful also in about the person, really paying attention to to not be abrasive in your feedback giving, just respecting the person as someone who means well, So yeah, that's one thing. The timely also, I think in general, giving feedback shortly after something has happened or something has been said is a really good practice, because it's like this is going to sound awful, but if you train a dog and the dog starts peeing around the corner where he's not supposed to do, and like half an hour later you tell him, hey, why did you do that? Like, the dog has no idea what you're talking about. But I mean, we are also a bit like that. If people come back to us like quite a few hours later, we're no longer on the moment, we're no longer in the scene. And I think, yeah, you really miss an opportunity to actually point to very specific things and actually give more details, because as the time goes by, we forget things.
I think that's for sure ideal, and I see the dog story behind here, but probably we are not always noticing the things as accurate and really in the moment. And it's for both sides, for the feedback giver and the receiver, the noticing part. I think we come to the receiver later on. But also when you work with someone or you support someone, only afterwards you realize certain things. Oh, I could have. So it's also in the moment for the person giving feedback, not always obvious and clear that there was an opportunity. So I think the noticing part is a really important one in giving and receiving feedbacks. And it has to do with being present, being fully here, fully, supporting someone and really listening. And it can be that it comes later on, and that's fine too, if it comes with a certain delay. And then it's probably less that I just give a feedback, but it's more than in a conversation. And I anyway think that being in conversation and weaving feedback into the conversation is a really nice thing, because then it gets mutual. It's then on both sides, and it's an opportunity for both sides to engage.
I agree. I think, yeah, the conversational nature also has another benefit. I mean, we just have conversations all the time. This is what we do as a species, and I think that creates that informality that is really a very good prerequisite for having a good feedback moment with each other. Whereas if you formalize it, if you really, you step out of the conversation like, and now I'm gonna give you feedback. It's like, whoa, and then you probably feel like, this is not the time. I'm sorry. Yeah. One other thing before we sort of also beat around the bush of what it means to give good feedback, but one other sort of attribute that I think is really essential is basing it on facts. Because I think it's very easy to get into the slippery slope of going into our own opinions, etc. But actually just observing and registering what has happened, what has been said, what has been done, and describing it in detail really, really helps. Because again, that's like, you're not in a conversation about who is right and who is wrong. It's like, this is what I've noticed. What do you see?
Yeah.
I think that helps.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And again, here, it's the noticing part. What do I see? What do I observe? What do I hear? And this is a very good, and I think it's also a very healthy entry point, and one that the other side can clarify, because then the understanding starts. If someone offers you a piece of information about yourself, then it's an invitation for your partners, the other side, the receiver, to check out, do I understand what you are sharing with me?
Yeah,
it needs to. I mean, a feedback is really a conversation and an exchange between two people or more. It can be in a team naturally as well.
Yeah, I think the understanding dimension that you just talked about is important in also both ways, because of course it's like making sure that the person you're in that conversation, the person you're giving feedback to, understands that you're also sharing some feedback, etc. But I think it's also a responsibility for the feedback giver to really have an attitude of seeking to understand the person, rather than comments like, oh, you should do this, you should do that, and start judging or advising, etc. I think it's like, I think that's why like a very useful stance, I think, is asking questions also first, before you really fully understand what happened, and then you can actually sort of perhaps decide to elaborate into real constructive feedback. Good feedback giving is also about indeed sort of giving the facts first, giving the sort of the implications, or in particular the effect it has had on other people, and then offering maybe some steps to, okay, so what can we do about this? Is there something, whether it's in positive or in negative, is there something that we can act upon to actually capitalize on what we're seeing happening? But I think, yeah, the important things there again, and we mentioned that in the first episode on feedback, is describing when you said this, when you did that, this is how it impacted me. Because I think that's, again, it's helping the other person be aware of their effect. And we never know. I mean, our words, our actions carry weight on other people. And until we actually check with them what was that impact on them, we have no measure to tell. We might sort of infer from their reactions, from their tone, their body language, whatever, but we're not entirely sure. And so in that sense, it's a really good thing. And a couple of other things to say about this is some good practice mentions saying things like, hey, I noticed, and then, it's like, so it's also, then it's not very threatening. It's more like, oh, here is a little thing that I observed. Yeah, can we elaborate a bit on that? Or another one, which is, like when you've seen something and it's maybe a sensitive piece of constructive feedback, so something that really could be improved. And you say, look, I have this, particularly in couple, this is something that might turn in very handy. It's like, I have this little theory about something that might be playing out here. And I just want to check with you whether it sounds right or not. And that can also be, because then it's not like, hey, this is the way it is, or I think, etc. It's more like, I'm not sure. Tell me if what I'm observing, what I'm sensing is actually right or wrong. And so again, you're inviting that conversation that very rightly you said is a very good way and very healthy way to
you really open the door, you kick it open. And I think it's an invitation for the other partner to engage or not. But it's really an invitation that it's nice to accept. Think about feedback. Many people have this in mind. There is some critique coming, and often it's also this, because I mean, we said in the beginning there is a vast sea of feedback in many forms, and we know with the spontaneous in the day we probably hear a lot of things that sound like, what's that piece of information in the air? How do I deal with this one?
It's really essential to keep constructive feedback, so critical feedback in private, and for two reasons. One is you give an opportunity for the other person to save their face. If you do it in public, I mean, it really feels like public shaming, and that's just that just makes people feel really miserable. And actually, rather than invite them for a conversation and an opening to learn and to change and whatever, you're actually sort of clamming them up like, I'm just like bracing myself even more. And I think secondly, and for that reason, it can really injure the relationship between people. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, look, a very, very sensitive and critical piece of feedback can be delivered, and it may temporarily make the relationship worse. But if you know that it's going to actually improve in the future, it is worth saying. But in general, if the feedback, however honest it is going to make the other person feel so miserable, it's really not worth it. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to preserve good relationships with people.
In which mindset a feedback is given is so crucial. And this is so important for the person offering a piece of feedback. What's my intention? Why do I give this? And what's my wish for the other person? Why do I share this? And how do I come across? And it needs a little bit of compassion as well. And I think we shouldn't forget this. And and understanding also in the perspective of the person receiving what this might trigger, what this could trigger. Defense. But that's not what we want. We probably rather want to engage in a conversation. So I think understanding the nature of feedback and what it does with us, and that there are different types of feedbacks, And as in many things in life, be clear for yourself why you share a piece of information. Yeah. What's your intention with this? Yeah. And then it's probably already coming well across. If you share it with a good intention, and not just because you want to give something back, but you want to help someone else to grow or to, yeah, to change certain aspects, how someone is doing something. Mm-hmm. So be intentional and compassionate at the same time is probably the most helpful advice for the person giving the feedback, I would say. Yeah. It's not a piece of information I just have to swallow as a pill and then, okay. No, I listen. And then I start really to notice, okay, what's triggered in me or not? What does it do with me? What's happening? Does it make sense to me or not? So it's really this whole part of observing, noticing, and trying to understand, and takes the time. And that's so helpful. It changes the whole attitude.
The feedback that people give to you really comes across, and you're not always aware of how you come across receiving that feedback. They talk about this, your leaky face, your leaky tone. So, like your face reacts in ways that are sometimes unintended. Your tone reacts in ways, your body reacts in ways that are not intended, that actually show how you're being triggered. And so it's really important, again, to be aware of that and to start, okay, what is going on inside me? And indeed to feel, to get a sense for which of these triggers are particularly resonating with you. Whether, I mean, the book talks about 3 triggers. There's maybe more, but I think these are 3 very good starting points: identity trigger, relationship trigger, and truth triggers. And another aspect that is worth mentioning in receiving feedback, in addition to being aware of these different triggers, I thought that there were 2 other things that were really, really helpful. One is, and that works only for moments of planned feedback. So it could be that evaluative feedback one time in a year, but it could also be another moment when you've just decided, okay, let's take stock and let's give each other feedback or whatever. But if you plan, if you have that planned moment, to really prepare yourself so that you start, particularly if you do expect some critical feedback emerging, to coach yourself through, not to coach yourself, but to prepare yourself mentally for the different scenarios that might unfold. Positive scenarios, not so positive scenarios. How would you react? What might you want to say, etc. And that doesn't mean that things are going to pan out this way. Very likely not, in fact. But it's like as ever, long preparation, short war, as General Patton used to say. So I think it really, the act of planning is necessary. The plan itself doesn't matter, but I think it really helps to be better prepared for managing this information that sometimes is overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice way to put yourself into the shoes of the other side, and what this could mean and trigger, and what could unfold. And the same is true for the person receiving a feedback. If it's planned or unplanned, I think it's important to understand that you are not in a passive role. It's not just because you are the receiver, you cannot be active and react and accept or not accept. And maybe even more important than that is that you have time, that there is space between you and this feedback, and that you can leave it for a moment if necessary, to digest it or to understand it, or to just to consider it and have a look at it and take your time to understand. So the receiver in an active role, I think this is an important aspect.
And so one of the helpful ideas I find is, you receive a piece of feedback, or it could be like, for instance, typical example is in your family, like your mother telling you something that you've heard too many times, your brother telling you something, whatever. And you're like, look, this is important, but this is not the moment, not here, not now, not about this, please, you know. And it's your right. It's your right to say that, and to find the space for that and the time for that, so that you're in the best possible mental condition to accept it, or to at least explore it together at another time. And another one that I particularly enjoyed was, if all else fails and you've received the feedback, you've tried to take it in, you've tried to change, and you realize, wow, I mean, this is just so not me. There's an advice about coaching the other person to accept the not changing you. It's also like, look, I know that you would wish me to do this, but I've tried and I just can't. So how can we deal with that? I'm not going to change on this, but how can we make it work somehow? And I thought it was such a brilliant piece of flexible mind to, okay, let's find another solution there. There must be one.
It's great, because it's as much about the giver as it is about the receiver. This is important. It needs two, and really ideally it's in a conversation, and giving something back that really doesn't fit, doesn't make sense, and then have a look from this perspective. I think that's important.
So that leads us also a little bit thinking about, good conditions to give and receive feedback. I mean, it boils down to that question. I mean, the sort of a smart step forward is to just get used to it, inoculate yourself. It's about approaching feedback from a different angle, and from opening up your mind to it in ways that really help you see it as an opportunity rather than a problem or a moment of difficulty.
Yeah.
And I think in our thinking, there's a few dimensions that are, or almost dichotomies, like that, polarities that are really helpful. It's like, it's not just about judging, or it's not necessarily about judging. It's about learning, and I think that's really important. It's not about your personality or who you are, but it's about your function and what you have done. And I think that's also a useful thing. It's also, I think it's a general mindset that I try to stimulate in myself. In any case, a growth versus scarcity. You know, if you are in a growth type of mindset, you will see opportunities everywhere. So it's not like, I know it's not perfect, but I'm going to get there, and there's other opportunities to evolve along the way. And there's even a final one that I think also in the world of knowledge management is something that we also refer to quite quickly around failing, the how we look at failing, because I think feedback also brings us back to that idea. Sometimes we feel like we are failing when we receive the feedback, but it's not about avoiding failure, and it's not about having problems with failure. It's rather developing together a space and a practice to have a safe fail rather than a fail safe. So it's like, it's safe to actually fail, to make some mistakes, recognize them. It's part of the growth. No one has gotten good at just doing nothing or just trying it for the first time. It just takes practice, and that's just the reality of it. Whereas if you have like very much a failure aversion, fail safe, then you don't tolerate failure. You don't tolerate mistakes, etc. And I think that really stands in the way of learning and of embracing feedback in a very positive way.
And I just would say, relax. Try to understand what the other person is sharing with you. Take your time, be curious. And for me, it's not about this reaction, this defensive reaction, but a reaction of curiosity. What are you telling me? What's in there? Ah, that's interesting. And that really helps me to relax and take my time to understand and to act, whatever that might be then.
Then you start seeing even more opportunities to practice both giving it and receiving it. Because I think it's in that making it familiar, which means it sort of de-emphasizes the power of feedback. It actually amplifies the power of it, because you actually receive more and more of it. But it feels, the ritual of giving or receiving feedback is much less impressive, because it's just like, it's a practice, it's a routine, it's something that we do, it's the way that we are, it's the way that we breathe. And again, this is not easy, but it is something to aspire to, I think, because there are opportunities everywhere to seize all the time.
Yeah, once the radar is open, we see and hear feedback everywhere.
Yeah. I think like even if you think about, for instance, a piece of work, a project or whatever that you're talking about work that you're involved in, before even you start can be a good moment to have feedback, to really understand, what is everyone's capabilities and potential, what you've seen from the past that might be useful for this. And then throughout, like getting into the practice of, for instance, doing some even daily after action review, which is something that the US Army has been heralding for years, for decades. And I mean, I do this for myself every day. I just like take a quick moment to reflect 3 things that really worked today, 3 things that I could have done differently. And at the end of the week, I really reflect on sort of 5 different questions that help me look at deeper patterns, etc. But that also, even though it's not feedback, it's like feedback to myself. So it's not as powerful, but it also does help somehow. Yeah, so like along similar lines, I think there's really a lot of value in paying attention to or seizing opportunities for feedback when an important moment is happening, when a sensitive conversation is happening, for instance, and it can be also, it doesn't have to be restricted to the world of work. I think feedback in our couple is a really useful thing. I mean, both supportive feedback, constructive feedback. Evaluative feedback, frankly, not. but also with our friends, getting a sense of, and of course you don't have to do it all the time. It doesn't have to be fabricated or anything, but there's so many opportunities in our community life, in the work, in the stuff that we do, in our networks, in our associations, in the football club, in the reading club, whatever. There's so many opportunities to get some accelerators and some mirrors about how you're doing and how others are also doing. I think it's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, and actually also the aspect of how are we doing together. I mean, it's also a sort of check-in, not a formal check-in, but this kind of conversations where you check in. How are we doing here together? How is it going for us? And it's about relationship, and it can really help and strengthen relationships in a team, in a network, in a community, but also in a network of friends. Why not? It's helpful and it changes for the good, I would say. At least that's what I observe.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think once you double up that practice of engaging feedback from others, of giving feedback to others, at least also checking. Oh, by the way, there's something I noticed. Do you mind if I tell you, or is it a moment to share that with you? Because then again, you give the opportunity for others to say no, not now, or whatever. But let's imagine, I mean, you get into that practice, and then I think there's 2 things that are really important. One is to reflect for yourself on the feedback that you've received, to really do that again. That own after action review by yourself is really helpful, because that helps you again understand better your triggers, etc. And progressively, you're calibrating your learning to take it even more deeply in as you go along. And I think the other one is,
but I just want to add on this one, but in an active role. And I think that's such an important point, because when you receive a feedback, you're in a different position than when you take this piece of information. What do you do with it? How do you reflect it? What's bubbling up for you? Then you're active, and then you're the owner, and it's your choice and it's your decision to do whatever you want to do for yourself, or going back to the person if that would be meaningful. And I think that's a relief that you are the actor and the owner of your own learning in the end.
Yeah.
And I think it's also healthy.
And talking about healthy, the other part is, of course, keeping healthy relationships. So particularly when you've been giving some feedback, and especially some constructive feedback, of course, there's that conversation, but I think it's also nice to every now and then just check in again with that person's, like, how do you feel about what they've just told you? Or how do you feel about that conversation we had about this the other day, etc. just to get a sense, because again, at the end of the day, I mean, feedback is important for our personal learning, but I think the objective that's always there is also to improve, to make the relationships more healthy and fruitful and nice and enjoyable with each other.
Exactly. So don't eat it as a frog and swallow it. Do something with it.
And in the third episode, we'll go into the collective dimension of feedback also.
Exactly.